is one of 17 districts. Today we are going to be talking about, 17 districts in Pennsylvania. Today we are going to be talking about a subject that is really near and dear to my heart, which is public service. And we're going to be trying to look at it from all the various different angles that it can be looked at, not only uniform service, but also what you can do within your community, what you can do to serve in different ways. We are joined by our moderator, Dr. Wayne Croft, Sr., who's the pastor here of the St. Paul's Baptist Church, and thank you so much for allowing us your facility and for hosting us today. We are also being joined by Michael Smith, right there, who is the CEO of AmeriCorps. We're going to be hearing extensively about AmeriCorps. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a tremendous organization that does an enormous amount in public service in our nation. We have panelist Captain Howard Crawford, retired U.S. Air Force, as well here on the panel, and panelist Kelly Young, AmeriCorps alum, also on the panel here to talk to us about AmeriCorps more in depth. Next slide, please. Our agenda, we do try very much to stay on time. I've been told I have 10 minutes, and I'm already 3 minutes into it, to make sure that I give you a good overview. Then we'll have 10 minutes of presentation from Mr. Michael Smith, who again is the CEO of AmeriCorps. We'll have a brief presentation as well by Dr. Wayne Croft, Sr., as I mentioned, the pastor of this fine church, and we'll have some questions and answers of our panel. You guys are encouraged, please, to fill out your questionnaires and send them in. Some closing remarks, and then we would welcome you to avail yourselves of the resource fair. We've tried to provide a bunch of different tables and opportunities for you to understand the service opportunities for our nation that are available, as well as for our community, too. The next slide, please. As I mentioned, this is a regular series that we run, a town hall once a month. Sometimes, as I mentioned, we do them in our community. Sometimes we do them via telephone. So as well, for those who can't necessarily make it in person, they have the chance to dial in. Those are very well attended and popular. But we are committed to a standard of civility and decency as well. And let me explain that a little bit. I used to be an educator. I was a chemistry teacher in North Philadelphia at Simon Gratz High School, 11th grade. One of the things that I learned about being a teacher, the hardest job I've ever done, by the way, is how important it is to maintain, a sense of learning and a classroom that has respect and treats everybody with decency and with respect. And 80-something town halls in, I can say that we have held to that commitment and that pledge to respect each other and to understand that we are all patriots and that we all love our country and that we all love our families and that we are all here because we want very much to honor that. So, importantly, we will discuss policy and not politics, and we will please maintain that sense of civility and decency. Next slide. To that end, we have asked you guys to fill out these comment cards. These comment cards are opportunities for you to tell us who you are, what's interesting and important to you. It's also an opportunity on the backside for you to be able to fill out questions that you might have for us. This subject matter is going to be primarily on the topic at hand, which is service, national service. But if you have questions on other things, I was speaking to folks in the audience recently who may have other questions. We'd love to get involved with you with that, with either some of the members of our team or with me at a different time. So we really want to make sure that you write down your questions. We're committed to answering those questions within 48 hours of this town hall, business hours of this town hall as well. We also want to make sure that if people are asking the same question, which sometimes happens, that we don't have everybody asking the same question 17 different times and a different question never getting asked at all. So, hello, thanks for coming. And so that's the reason why we do these cards. So if you have those cards, please look to any of the members of my team. And there are many members of my team who are here to collect them. Next slide, please. A little bit of a congressional update. A little bit of a congressional update now. Let's go to the next slide. This is where we are. A congressional district is about 700 and something thousand people. We sit, of course, in sort of the heart of Chester County, but the 700,000 people that are the 6th congressional district are Chester County as well as the lower part of Berks County. To the left, you see what the old district looked like before we did redistricting. Redistricting happens every 10 years. And most recently, we redistricted only slightly to include just a little bit more of Berks County. This is a cool district because it's roughly speaking 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, 20% Independent. It's purple. It's also a really cool district because it is very, very diverse in lots of different ways. In addition to being diverse in lots of different ways, you can look at that and know that we're suburban, we're rural, and we're urban. The city of Reading, the mushroom and dairy farms, and the suburbs of Philadelphia. Next slide, please. One of the biggest jobs that we have is to serve our community with what's called constituent services, or casework. This is just a little blurb from one of our constituents for some of the work that we're able to do for them. We are able to do anything to help you with your interaction with the federal government. So healthcare questions, Medicare, Medicaid, passport issues, immigration issues, IRS issues, Veterans Affairs issues, flying a flag for somebody that's important to you, visiting our capital, our nation's capital. Those are just some of the things that we can do for you, and that is of service to you. We also have returned about more than $55 million in the last 5 years of value to our community, and that is something that is also really important to me as well. Next slide, please. We mentioned at the beginning that civility and decency is super important to our office, and I believe it's really important to our nation. I believe it's really important to our community. We are a community that I think is pragmatic. We are problem solvers. We want our government to work for us. I'm very, very pleased and honored to have been recognized for that bipartisanship with an award that's given to 4 members of Congress a year and 2 senators a year on both sides of the aisle. We work very hard to make sure that we are bipartisan in our work. 92% of our bills have been bipartisan, meaning signed by a Democrat and a Republican, and 86% of the ones that I have co-sponsored have been bipartisan as well. So the ones I introduce are bipartisan, and the ones that I support are bipartisan. So if you're interested in me supporting a piece of legislation, a good start is to see, is it bipartisan? Next slide, please. I really do believe in a fundamental commitment to service. We're going to spend a lot of time in the next couple minutes talking about that. I came here in an unusual way. My father was a refugee. He came here from Lviv, what is now Ukraine. He survived the Holocaust as a small child. He served more than 20 years in the military. He happened to marry the boss's daughter. My grandfather was his skipper. So I'm 3rd generation military. I served in the Air Force myself. And I also went on in my 40s to serve in AmeriCorps with Teach for America, as I mentioned, in North Philly, teaching chemistry. So lastly, my service in Congress is what I hope to be a culmination of a lot of experiences to be able to represent our community. This is the second to last slide that I'll talk about, which is some of the things that we're doing in Congress to that end of making sure that we're supporting service. AmeriCorps, we unfortunately are in the process of defunding AmeriCorps, and so our office has been fighting for level funding at a minimum, and that's some of the things that we've been doing. We've also been fighting to make sure that the military service and more traditional AmeriCorps service or other service are combined in the sense that if for whatever reason you don't find yourself a fit for the military, we want to make sure that you understand what your other opportunities are in service as well. So those are some of the things that actually require legislation to be able to do. And the final slide before we move on. We have an important thing for those of us who are of a certain age, who are of a certain gender, which is selective service. We would encourage you, if you are somebody who is turning 18 or maybe between the ages of 18 and 26 and are male, to make sure that you have registered for this selective service. It's important because it's the law, and it's also important because it allows you to be able to access a lot of funds for college as well as opportunities for federal jobs too. If you have any questions about this afterwards, I'd be happy to answer them. Finally, before we move on, a little bit about the Quality of Life panel in Washington, and the final thing about our update in what goes on in DC. There is a panel called the Quality of Life panel. You see myself and Representative Don Bacon here, a Republican from the state of Nebraska. He and I lead this panel. It is all about the quality of life of our men and women in uniform, and this is one of the biggest things that I do in Congress in service of our people. The final thing is I get the chance to introduce Mr. Michael Smith again. Since joining AmeriCorps, Michael has sharpened the agency's focus on equity, investing in what works, and uniting communities through the power of service. He has overseen the last 6 key focus areas of AmeriCorps, which are education, economic opportunity, disaster services, environmental stewardship, healthy futures, and veterans and military families. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Michael Smith for his presentation, and we'll move on from there.
everyone. How are you? Good. It is wonderful to be in Westchester and Pennsylvania during what is AmeriCorps Week. So I cannot think of a better way for me to end my AmeriCorps Week to be in a district where service is so proudly held as a value here, and where you have such a strong, fierce advocate for service, someone who has lived a life of service, a career of service, and my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Houlihan, who wants me to call her Chrissy. But I feel like my mother is over my head saying, "Don't you call that Congresswoman Chrissy?" So I'm gonna try, but I may slip back to the Congresswoman every now and again. Dr. Croft, thank you for hosting us in this beautiful historic church. I was a Pentecostal pew baby, so I feel very comfortable in the church, and I can feel all sorts of good spirit in this place. So thank you for what you do in the service that this church provides to the community. It is wonderful to be here in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania alone, we have more than 7,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that are serving in more than 1,000 locations across the state. Right here in the 6th Congressional District, we have over 100 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that are serving in 30 locations across the 6th District. So as the Congresswoman said, I lead AmeriCorps, which is the federal agency for volunteering and service. We have a very simple mission, a proud mission, which is how do we strengthen communities, how do we improve lives, how do we foster civic engagement through the power of volunteering and service. And what I love about this work, I really do believe I have the best job in the federal government. Sorry, Congresswoman. I don't have to deal with a lot of the headaches that you have to deal with, but I really do get to see America at its best. You know, every now and again, folks are saying our democracy is fraying and people aren't talking to one another. And I say, come travel with me. Because there are folks wearing red hats and blue hats that after hurricanes, fires, and floods, they just see neighbors. And they're rolling up their sleeves and they are helping their neighbors at times of great challenge, and it allows them to see each other's humanity. I'm excited about the work that our AmeriCorps members do during their service, but what's even more exciting is the fact that we now have 1.3 million alum and millions more AmeriCorps senior volunteer alums who have served their community, like the Congresswoman, like someone you're going to hear from on the panel today. Beyond our alums, we have about 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers that serve in nearly 40,000 locations across the country. And our alumni, they turn their years of service into lifetime of social action. They become teachers, they become administrators, they become nonprofit leaders, corporate executives, even members of the United States Congress. And the Congresswoman is not the only one. We have several members of Congress who served who were AmeriCorps members. One of the things that we lift up during our 30th anniversary is we talk about this idea that for the past 3 decades, every single time America called in the past 30 years, AmeriCorps answered. AmeriCorps members answered. And I think about that, I think after 9/11, there weren't folks who were maybe able to go serve in the military, but they said, I wanted to join AmeriCorps because I want to serve here in my community. I think after Hurricane Katrina, when Louisiana and Mississippi were devastated, in that 10 years after Hurricane Katrina, we saw 40,000 AmeriCorps members go and help rebuild, move from rebuilding to recovery, move from recovery to resilience after Hurricane Katrina. And during the pandemic, when a lot of nonprofit organizations had to close their doors, some of you may know Peace Corps, colleagues at Peace Corps had to bring 8,000 Peace Corps members home and stop their service. AmeriCorps members never stop serving. When teachers had to figure out what this Zoom thing was, AmeriCorps members were right alongside them figuring out what Zoom was. I remember Grammy Fran I met in Maine. She's one of our foster grandparents. She said, my principal called me and told me I couldn't see my kids. And she said, I wasn't leaving my baby, so I taught myself how to use that iPad. And she taught her other foster grandparents how to use that iPad, and they continued to serve during the pandemic. And that same power showed up right here in Chester County, where we have AmeriCorps members that are serving in the foster grandparents programs, the AmeriCorps seniors programs, at the local Olivet Boys and Girls Club. And I've heard about our Up to Us Sports AmeriCorps program, which is using sports and coaching to address some of the most pressing issues that are facing youth. They're talking about mental wellness. They're talking about gender, social justice, economic mobility. They're supporting the schools, the parks and recreation centers, and they're doing things like marketing and programming and fundraising and even helping the administration of the work that's happening. And so you can probably tell that I am proud of this agency and the work that I do, but this work is very personal for me, as I know it probably is for many of you. I was born to teen parents in Western Massachusetts. We didn't have a whole lot of money, but we had a village that loved one another, that took care of each other. We were rich in things that were beyond money. And I remember my mom tells me, she tells me whenever she needs something from me, she says, you know, I took 6 buses a day. I took 6 buses a day to get you to daycare, to get myself to school, and so now you come down here and you come see your mother, and then of course I but you know, one of the things that she would tell me, she's like, look, I had to do something. I had to find some cheap daycare for you. So there's this Boys and Girls Club down the street. So I sent you there. That was her sole goal, cheap daycare. But what she didn't know was she got this village for her son. A village of volunteers. It's actually where I met foster grandparents before AmeriCorps was even created. I met AmeriCorps Vista members. I met youth development professionals. People that loved me, that lifted me up, that kept me in line, and that became this extra force for my family and was really the lifeline for us. And it was at my Boys and Girls Club that I not only had that village, but it was this opportunity to serve at a young age. They didn't ask us to serve. They said, the seniors are coming in today to get their share packages. You go and you move those boxes. Or we're going down to the food bank and we're going to help out here. Or you know what, these parks are falling apart. We're going to go help rebuild. And it was those opportunities to serve that showed me that while we didn't have a whole lot, I had a lot to give. And that is the power of service. Not only to transform the lives of those that are being served, but to transform the lives of people that serve as well. I hear from AmeriCorps members all the time who say to me, you know what, I feel bad about this, but I think I'm getting more out of this than I'm giving. And that is the secret. So, you know, the last thing I would say, I love hearing from our members and volunteers how service opens doors for them to learn new skills, to build social capital. And while meeting these critical community needs, AmeriCorps members, they get training, they get hands-on experience, and they get skills that jumpstart their careers. And we often see AmeriCorps members who start off working in schools, working in a food bank, working in a climate project, and years later, they're teachers, they're principals. They're helping to write policy to fix some of those issues that they so desperately care about. And AmeriCorps members are actually more likely to stay in the social sector and to continue doing this work for the rest of their lives. So I'm excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. And I think about something that Dr. King said when I think about what you're going to hear about on this panel today. Some of you probably heard the quote, anybody can be great because everybody can serve. He went on in that quote to say, you don't need a college degree to serve, which I am so proud of the fact that we are bringing in people no matter where they come from. He said you don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. He said you just need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And what we get to see in AmeriCorps and what we get to see in public service are those hearts full of grace, those souls generated by love. And I'm excited to share more about how you can become a part of that beautiful family here today. So thank you very much for inviting me.
I now have the privilege of inviting Dr. Croft to come up. He's our awesome host. Introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his life of service, and also to begin a couple of questions for our panelists. Please remember, if you have questions, to turn them in to any number of our team members, and Dr. Croft will be organizing them for your questions from the audience as well. So.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Well, by now you know I am Wayne B. Croft Sr., the pastor of this church, St. Paul's Baptist Church, which is 137 years old. We are a church that stands on 4 pillars: global missions, outreach, discipleship, and social justice. And we seek to help people to have a voice, not only in the church, but also in the community. I also serve as the professor of homiletics and liturgics at United Lutheran Seminary, and I was privileged to serve in the United States Army 13 Bravo and 64 Charlie.
Right.
Yeah, I was a grunt. I stand on the fact that the truth is, and I try to help St. Paul's understand this, that everybody in the community may not belong to the church, but the church belongs to everyone in the community. And we seek to hold courageous conversations here, forums like this 84th Town Hall meeting, as well as other political forums, because we want to be able to speak truth to power, but not only speak truth to power, but speak truth to the powerless, and help them to have a voice as well. I have a few questions that I want to ask the panelists, direct towards the panelists, like Michael Smith. I kind of hear my mother saying, don't call her Chrissy. Congressman Houlihan. I'll say Congresswoman Chrissy. One aspect of your career we haven't reviewed today is how and why you pivoted from your work as a COO for a global for-profit company to working with Teach for America. What led to that decision?
Can you guys hear me?
All right, there you go. So I'm an operator. I've spent my life operating things. I'm an engineer, and I spent the very first kind of 15 or so years of my career engineering in the military, operating in business, but always really passionate about education, particularly women and girls in STEM and STEAM, and particularly underserved communities who didn't have opportunities to STEM and STEAM, meaning science, technology, engineering, and math. In my company, N1, the one that I helped grow, we had 40 hours of community service to use for whatever we wanted. Every employee had that 40 hours. I always used it to help volunteer in schools, and particularly in science, and substitute teaching in communities that I thought needed my help. When I finished working at N1, I really felt as though I wanted to take my operational background into something that was in desperate need of help. And I think at that point thought that education was the number one place that I could be most useful. But I first needed to understand what was happening in our classrooms. And so that's why I sought out AmeriCorps and Teach for America. Teach for America allowed me to be able to experience something remarkable in a chemistry classroom, which is our kids, particularly those in places like Graz, are really struggling. I was teaching chemistry the same year that my daughter, my youngest, was taking chemistry. 12 miles away, my daughter had books and a lab and, pencils, things like that. 12 miles from here, my kids did not have those things. And not only did they not have those things, they were not reading at above a 3rd and 4th grade level, and so they were really struggling to be able to understand the content that I was trying to teach. Which is why after teaching, I pivoted into running a nonprofit that focuses on early childhood literacy for those communities that don't have the same opportunities that this community does here. And so that was my journey in education.
Thank you. Michael Smith, in what ways can AmeriCorps be a pipeline to securing a job after members or volunteers complete their term of service?
Great question. People talk about the idea that service is selfless, but it can be selfish too, and that is okay. There is data that shows that through your service, it increases physical health, it increases mental health, it decreases social isolation, increases social cohesion. 82% of our AmeriCorps members said that it was a defining professional experience for them. 88% of our AmeriCorps nonprofits that we work with hire AmeriCorps members. Many of them actually end up creating jobs after they work with these passionate, dedicated AmeriCorps members who are oftentimes outworking everybody else that's there. And so one of the things that we're deliberately doing, because we find so many of our AmeriCorps members end up staying in the fields where they start serving, we are much more deliberately making sure that when you do your AmeriCorps service, you're getting training, you're getting credentialing, you're getting a coach to help you think about a job pathway. So for instance, President Biden just launched the American Climate Corps. And AmeriCorps is running that along with several other federal agencies that are investing in it. And we heard from young people like, we're really worried about climate change, we're really worried about conservation, we don't know what to do about it. And they're like, well, there's things that you could do. So we're gonna put them into service right now, but also give them training and then deliberately help them get the good paying jobs that are in the climate and green energy space. Another thing that we did was Public Health AmeriCorps that we launched with the Centers for Disease Control. After the pandemic, they came to us and said, we need 80,000 more public health workers. We are missing 80,000 public health workers. We've seen some of your AmeriCorps members that are out and about, so can we work together? CDC is providing training. We now have 3,000 public health AmeriCorps members that look like the communities where they serve, and they are not only serving today, but deliberately being helped so that they stay in public health careers. And the last example I'll give is a program that was launched after Hurricane Sandy called FEMA Corps. FEMA saw AmeriCorps members that were working hard. They had gotten creative. They figured out how to use technology to register folks for benefits instead of having to bring them back to the office. And they said, we need some of those AmeriCorps members. So we now have FEMA Corps AmeriCorps members. And in the past 10 years, FEMA has hired 25% of those alone. And in the last two graduating classes, 70% of them got job offers. So if you go to FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C., you cannot walk down the hall without finding an AmeriCorps member that's there. So what folks need to know is that service really isn't a year back, it is not a year off. It can really be a rocket fuel towards your career goals. And not only for young folks like Kelly that you're gonna hear from, but for many of our seniors, like who are coming back saying, I wanna get back into the workforce, and service becomes an opportunity for them as well.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Before I
Sir?
move to the next
sir.
person.
My name is Thomas McNellis. When my son went to Princeton, one of his research topics from the summer happened to be with NOAA, and he was very interested and very satisfied with that. Would someone like me, a senior, be able to get involved with, clean energy or, something that deals with anti-global warming?
Yes, the answer is yes. We've got this great exhibit hall that's happening out afterwards, and we've got folks that are working for AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps seniors. There is something, regardless of the issue that you care about, regardless of the age, if you're 18 or 80, we've got a way to get you involved. So we're going to find you after, and we're going to get you connected.
Before we go to the next question, I do want to acknowledge the mayor of Westchester, Elaine B. Baptiste. Now, you have not heard from Captain Howard, but Captain Howard is with us. He is a retired captain of the United States Air Force. Captain Crawford, I'm sorry, you've been retired from the United States Air Force for a number of years. Why do you continue to serve this community and country?
So, thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan, for having me today and the rest of the panel. Before I answer that question, so, service comes in a lot of different looks, right, as we see today. I just want a quick shout out to our law enforcement officers that are here today who are serving. And I say that because, I was listening to Mike's story, and they're very similar. I grew up in New York, single mom, multiple sclerosis, in a wheelchair with 4 kids under the age of 4. I have a twin brother, if you're doing the math. And I didn't know what to do, but I came from a family of service. My father served in the Korean War. My grandfather served in World War II. I am the 6th generation of my family to serve. I became a New York City paramedic. I didn't know what to do, but I took care of my mom, so healthcare became natural for me. She got to a point in her life, she said, get the heck, isn't really what she said, but get the heck out of here and serve. And I went in the military as a medic. People wonder why I'm the world's oldest captain. I served 10 years enlisted as a medic. I loved every minute of it. And I had a commander who saw something in me I didn't see, and that was leadership. And he pushed me to get my degree, and when I got my degree, that the Air Force paid for, I became an officer, and therefore, and I got injured, is why I got retired at 21 years actually in the Air Force. Every day of my service, putting that uniform on, told me one thing and one thing only, right? It was my faith, but it was in a belief of something greater than me, right? And my faith is part of that, but serving my country, which is exactly what AmeriCorps is, it's exactly what Congresswoman Houlihan's doing every single day on the Hill, fighting the battles. It's about our country, and that's what I'm ultimately proud of. And I just, to finish it up, I still continue, I serve on Christie's Academy Board, interviewing young men and women who want to serve in the military as an officer. I mentor them as an admissions officer for the Air Force Academy and the commander of the American Legion in town. I'm involved with the Disabled American Veterans. And these are all organizations that care. And now I'm retiring from my civilian job so I can continue to fight for our veterans, make sure they get the benefits they get. But just to finish, one last thing. The best part of my service in my entire career was 2 years ago when I got to swear my son in as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And he's leaving for active duty in 4 weeks. You want to talk about a proud dad moment. And I couldn't have done it without all of you in the service to our country and what we believe in. So thank you.
Ellie is an alum of AmeriCorps. How did your time with AmeriCorps influence and elevate your life experience?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. This is really wonderful. I was very surprised to be asked. I cannot say enough positive things about AmeriCorps and my experience in AmeriCorps. And when Mike was listing all the benefits, each one, I thought, I had that. And I also, it really resonated with me when he said, many people comment that the service that they performed felt more like a benefit for themselves. And you serve to be selfless, but also it's selfish. I identify very much with that. The program that I was in was called Reading Assist, and we taught structured reading concepts, multisensory reading basics to 1st through 3rd graders in the Wilmington Public Schools who were behind on literacy. And it was incredibly meaningful. I had 6 students per year that I would meet with for an hour each day. And I got to have this fantastic mentor relationship with these students and see them improve and become more confident, which was beautiful. But I also got tons of professional development training. I can remember attending it was a talk on the different socioeconomic classes and poverty, growing up in poverty versus growing up with wealth, money type of wealth, because there are other types of wealth. And it just clicked so much for me, and I think helped me. I didn't continue in education, but I definitely wanted to continue in service, and so after AmeriCorps, I was able to make the decision to go to law school, and now I work for Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania, where we try very hard to serve every day as many people as we can.
I want to pivot now to ask the panelists some questions that have come from the floor. Kind of know how these things work, and that a lot may be given what's going on in our country. So many things going on in our country may be directed towards Congresswoman Houlihan, but I hope that we have asked questions about public service. Now, this is the first time I'm doing this, so I have to look at it. What are some ways that people, especially teenagers, could get involved with your office or campaign?
So thank you for the question. All kinds of people can get involved with our office. This is actually this is worth a civics lesson right now. This event right now, where we are sitting right now, is an official event. So during this event, none of us should talk about politics or party or elections. So we will not. What we will talk about, though, is the fact that our official office, what we officially do, has an enormous amount of need for people to be able to help us. We have an internship program that happens every quarter. Sue Walker is our queen of all, my right arm, and she helps manage and run that internship program. So if you're interested in applying for that, there is a link on our website, and our website is houlihan.house.gov. Importantly, this internship program, we really strive to make sure, to your point, that this isn't just an experience of, one thing that you're doing, that you come out of that internship with incredible skills and opportunities to be able to do more than, the proverbial making coffee and making copies. And so you are asked to get engaged with our constituencies. And because of that, we ask that you are at least 18. Because as you can probably appreciate, even if you just watched last week's news, we got an awful lot of calls to our office and awful lot of people asking for help who we need to be able to handle professionally with civility and decency. And sometimes that's a little overwhelming if you're not above 18. And we certainly don't also want you to be put into a position where people are yelling and screaming at you if you're below 18 as well. So please take a look at that on our website.
Can we ask a follow-up? What is it that triggered you last week?
What is it that triggers
What
what?
happened last week that you got out?
Oh, the TikTok call. Yeah. We had thousands and thousands of calls that came into all of our congressional offices, not just ours, but every congressional office, to be really, I think it's worth talking about. What happened is there was a piece of legislation where we were asked to vote whether or not TikTok should be required to be divest from their owner. ByteDance needed to divest that from them. ByteDance is their parent company and is also owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And so this legislation was not to ban TikTok, it was rather to say that within 6 months' time, they needed to find a different owner. And that owner needed not to be associated with the Chinese Communist Party. What TikTok did, interestingly, and there's no evidence that the Chinese government had anything to do with this, but what TikTok did was they miscalculated. They sent out a push message, a text message, and a message to all of their users that said, are you angry that they're going to ban TikTok? Call your congressperson. And they did that using geolocation, meaning they pinpointed where those people were, and using their zip code, and they sorted by who your congressperson was, and it pushed out. And as near as I can tell, they may have also dialed the number for them, because many of the people who called didn't know they were on the phone. And so lots and lots of phone calls, and frankly, many of them were from minors, very, very upset about the idea that they were going to have their TikTok taken away. But it was exactly the wrong calculation on the part of TikTok, because it proved the point that there is a power in pushing out that kind of information to people, false information to people, and that power cannot be in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Glad you addressed it, because one of the questions is, what is your opinion on the ban of TikTok?
I voted yes, that they should be separated from their parent company, ByteDance, but I did not vote to ban TikTok.
Excuse me.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Excuse me, sir?
Should national service be compulsory for all high school graduates, non-military service, civilian workforce, and gap years?
I'd love to take that question. So, then I'll make you do it. This is a really important question. There was a National Commission on Service of all forms, military as well as things like City or Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, those kinds of things. And the commission had, I think, 3 years to come out with a report. It actually happened to come out in March of 2020, so it happened right when the pandemic hit. Unfortunately, because of that, it was hard for there to be enough fanfare about what the findings were. But basically the findings were that there is a need for national service and an appetite for national service, but there is not the demand for national service in our country to be mandatory. And so that mandating that is probably not what the American people want. That being said, I believe that there is a need for us as legislators and as leaders of our country to make it easy for people to be able to serve in various ways, shapes, and forms, and to create pathways like AmeriCorps, and to be able to have people feel like that they can. I really struggle with this gap year concept because it's just, I think, a poor way of expressing things, because I think it doesn't delay you, I think it augments you, but to be able to have the opportunity to serve in some way. And that's why some of the things that we're doing in our office, legislatively as well as otherwise, is to try to push those two worlds together, the world that is the civilian service world and the world that is the military service world. 70% of people who apply for our military today are not eligible. So 70%, for whatever reason, whether they don't pass the physical test, whether they can't pass the written tests, whether there's something else going on with them, 70% are not able to explore that as an option. And so we want to be able to say, with that 70%, is there a possibility that you might be interested in something else? And oh, by the way, with the 70% that don't make it, we need to understand that better. We need to make sure that we're understanding why 70% can't make the grade. And in a lot of cases, the reason why 70% can't make the grade is my kids at Gratz. They can't make it through that test. They can't make it through that physical fitness test. And so one of the things we were able to do through the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the annual bill that we put together on the Armed Services Committee, is ask that question. By zip code, so this is the reverse of TikTok, we're actually using data for good. By zip code, why are people not being able to matriculate into the military? So that we can understand what's happening there that is allowing them not to be able to be successful in their dreams. And so those are some of the things that we can do, rather than mandate national service, rather to make it more appealing to them. Would you like to add to that?
I can add something to that, yeah. I think it's Bill Lynn. So as the local Air Force Academy admissions officer, and I see Sergeant Ashby from the Air Force Recruiting Service here, our number one issue is what we call MHS Genesis, Military Healthcare System. So your son, daughter, granddaughter went to the doctor when they were 12 years old and got an inhaler for bronchitis, but the doctor accidentally put down asthma. Right? Now, it used to be self-attestation. Now the government pulls this feed. And by the way, my son went to Valley Forge Military College. I saw your jacket there. And what happened was, now all of a sudden they're medically disqualified before they get to start the process. We have to fix that. And what Congresswoman Houlihan said was spot on. Think about the young men and women that I've been mentoring for 2-3 years while they're in high school. That's dreams are to go to a service academy or ROTC. They get disqualified. I have no way of saying, you know what? Now there's AmeriCorps and there's other ways you can serve that's out of my purview to help those students. So we as a district maybe can really look into that and figure out how we can do it. So when you said that, Congresswoman Houlihan, I got excited, right? That is exactly what we as a community can do.
Sir? I don't have a question, but I.
Deal with the cards because I want to make sure people who took the
Okay,
time to
this
bring
only
their
takes a
cards
second.
get their questions
I
answered.
don't
Why
want
did the
to,
VA withdraw from using Brandywine Hospital for VA and rumored ER for the civilians?
So, let's talk about the VA for a second. Going all the way back to 5 or 6 years ago, I think there was a piece of legislation that mandated that there was a study that would look at the use of all of our VAs in the nation and make recommendations on whether or not they should be closed or changed to be able to better serve our veterans and also to be able to better use our for-profit system or our nonprofit system in the case of places like Penn Medicine. That report came back and said that Coatesville VA was on the chopping block. They also came back and said that the Philadelphia VA was on the chopping block. They came back, I think, with 17 VAs, and 2 of them were in our area. And that was pretty much a non-starter for us here in this office and here in this community. So, luckily, the Secretary of the VA, Mr. McDonough, Secretary McDonough, is a lovely, lovely man. And I gave him a call and I said, you need to come up here and you need to see what it is that you're proposing to close. You need to understand the geography, literally the geography of what it is to live in our community and what it means to close both of those places for our vets. And so, the long story short, the VA will not close. But the question I think that's being asked is concurrently, Brandywine Hospital also closed. And so we ended up with a possibility where we would have real problems with healthcare, not just for our veterans, but also for us. And for many of us who live in the Southern Chester County area, we still are being required to go to places like Paoli Hospital, Westchester Hospital, because there's just nothing really left in the Southern Chester County hospital area. Here's where the good news is, and here's where your federal government actually did something right, and you're welcome. What happened was we passed a piece of legislation called the PACT Act, and the PACT Act was awesome for veterans of a certain generation, and really frankly all veterans, because it recognized that veterans might have been exposed to toxic elements in the course of their job, and they didn't have to prove that they were exposed to those toxic elements. They just had to demonstrate that they were there, like physically there. And because of that PACT Act, we now have an enormous number of veterans who now have access to health care opportunities that they didn't have before. But also because of the PACT Act, in a very tiny little clause in the PACT Act, there was the opportunity for nonprofit educational institutions to be able to partner with veterans hospitals. So follow me on this. Penn Medicine, one of the nation's best medical providers and best hospitals and best providers of doctors, could partner with the VA and could allow the VA to co-locate, to rent space from Penn Medicine in legally, federally allowed for the first time. So what does that mean? What that means is that we have a dearth, a lack of health care in Southern Chester County for all of us. Penn Medicine wants to come to Southern Chester County. They want to come to Southern Chester County, but they may not be able to support a large institution or infrastructure without also partnering with the VA. So the VA is going to, if all things work out, be able to rent space and also share resources across the Penn Medicine system. And so this will be a win-win for all of us if it happens. So our job, again, this is an official office. I cannot, influence what Penn does. I cannot, I can influence what the VA does, but I can't influence what Penn does. But I ultimately hope they are able to build this hospital or buy this hospital, be able to co-locate, rent the VA space, and then we all will have better health care in that area. This will take time, but this is the kind of things that are happening. I had breakfast with Secretary McDonough just this last week and talked to him again about this. And so we're still working on it, and I know that my office is also constantly working on it as well. I hope that was a question.
Apparently, the ACP has ended, no longer available. This week I spoke to Chester County Library staff about the hotspot rental program. Perhaps this could be developed and expanded upon.
So I'm not sure what the acronym ACP is.
Affordable Connections Program.
Or the Affordable Connection Program is. I will take this as an action item to try to understand what this program is and whether it's federal or state or local and how we can be helpful. What I will say that I do know is that there's also something called the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, IIJA, I'm missing the I. And the IIJA was passed about 1.5 years, 2 years ago by Congress, and it is an infrastructure bill. So roads, bridges, tunnels, those kinds of things, and lots of resources are coming our way from that historic kind of 30, 40-year piece of legislation. But the reason it comes to mind is that a very big part of that is broadband, and making sure that there is broadband everywhere. places like, Philadelphia, and also places, I was out in Reading and southern Chester County yesterday, and sitting in a parking lot where there was no broadband. And so we want to make sure that we have a steady supply of information for everyone too, and that will be coming soon as well. Okay, apparently we only have 5 minutes. It says, remember to remind the audience that questions not answered will be answered by staff.
I just have
Will
one
there be
comment.
programs or organizations set up to help LGBTQ plus, especially trans people and their families, escape or leave from states that are endorsing and encouraging violence against members of the LGBTQ plus community?
This is a very important and interesting question. One of the reasons I ran for Congress is that my oldest daughter is a member of the LGBTQ community, and I'm very fiercely an advocate of the LGBTQ community. I was privileged enough to be able to vote not once but twice on the Equality Act. Unfortunately, as you all remember in your Schoolhouse Rock, it looks like most of you are of an age that you know what I'm talking about with Schoolhouse Rock. Just voting on it on the House side doesn't mean that the Senate is taking it up. They have not taken it up yet, but we have been able to make the law of the land that you should be able to marry the person who you'd like to marry, which I'm very, very grateful for. I was actually able to go to the lawn of the White House with my daughter and her wife and celebrate that. So that was a pretty cool victory. I'm not sure, thank you, I'm not really sure what to say about, state by state issues here. I will say this. We have something called community project funding. Community project funding is what it sounds like. You all submit ideas to us. In our congressional office, we process those ideas. We submit a subset of them up to the federal government. That subset of them hopefully is funded through the traditional appropriations process. This is a process that's designed to be in and of our community. These ideas come from our community. We have an independent board that we put together of people from our community who evaluate community project funding ideas. We received more than 40 of them last year, and we were able to submit 15 of them to the federal government for consideration. One of the 15 was not accepted. And let me go into some quick detail. I know I have very little time, but this is really important to me. The reason it wasn't accepted, having gone through remember Schoolhouse Rock, it went through the committee, the subcommittee of jurisdiction, it went through the committee. It got passed by both of those. 4,000 ideas from our communities across the country were submitted, and 3 of them at the very last minute were taken out and were singled out because they had the word or the letters LGBT in them. So one of them was ours. And it was for a community service up in the Reading area that helps people with health care, that literally is a health care provider for the LGBTQ community. And because it had those letters in there, it was rejected. It's obscene to me that people have that sort of hate in their heart, that they don't understand that our community, Democrats and Republicans, people from Chester County and Berks County, from all over our community, made a choice that was one of the 15 projects that we thought was most important to our community. And somebody in Washington made the choice that it wasn't. And that makes me really, really angry. So I know that there are probably people here in the audience who don't share my opinion on this issue, and I'm okay with that. I hope that you have heard over the course of the last hour that there is likely 80 or 90% of the things that we do share an opinion on. We do share the same values on. And I hope that I am able to serve our community as best as I am able, even though I know that I won't always hit every single one of the issues that are important to you.
I would love to see Representative run for president. She gets things done, and she knows politics, and she can work very well with people.
Thank you, sir.
It's true.
Thank you for allowing us.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna say some real quick things, closing remarks, and hopefully hit it on time. Thank you all, really genuinely, thank you all for being part of this. It's really very cool to hear from you. As my note card said, if we weren't able to get to your question, and perhaps it maybe didn't have something directly to do with our topic, or we weren't able to get to it, we will give you a call back within the next 24 to 48 hours. It's a weekend, so please give my team the grace to come back to work on Monday and do that. Thank you so much to AmeriCorps and for doing great work in the Pennsylvania 6th, and especially up in the Reading area as well. I've had the chance to go to the Olivet Boys and Girls Club, Teach for America, and spoken as well with the AmeriCorps senior at Alvernio College as well, up in the Berks County area. Amazing experiences. I will say, for those who asked about, is there something for me out there? There is something for you out in the fair. There's a senior corps. There's also a grandparents opportunity. I've had the chance to meet some people who participate in that too. On the federal front, we really need to make sure that we have public service organizations that get the resources that they deserve. It's absolutely obscene that we're taking away resources from these kinds of organizations. Somebody who's an AmeriCorps person, a VISTA person, is probably making less than $30,000 a year. They are eligible for food stamps. The idea that that's too much money to pay for what I would call, and the military would call, a force multiplier. Somebody who's in that community, who's working hard to elevate that community, and it's not worth $30,000 is obscene to me. And it's also, of course, not just about money. We need to make sure that we're supporting public service in every way that we can. Making national service easier for people. Making national service and military service easier for men and women and their families who serve. Making opportunities for them and ensuring educational benefits for people who do things like AmeriCorps, who do things like serving in the military, and who do things like being our first responders and our men and women in uniform here in our communities. You should be valued and honored and rewarded for that kind of service.
Yeah.
So, I'm really grateful for the chance to have this conversation. Remember that there is one of these conversations every month. They tend to rotate in our community. They rotate in time of day. They rotate in day of the week, and they rotate in subject matter. So please continue to participate in this democracy. Please make sure that you take a look at the availability